Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine a political system, not dreamt up last Tuesday, but designed over, what, 3,000 years ago?
Yeah, I'm about that.
To tackle a surprisingly modern head-scratcher, how does a small state effectively govern a whole bunch of much larger ones?
It's pretty wild when you think about it.
Fast forward to our 21st century, and this very system is now being looked at as a potential philosophy for how the world could be run. Kind of makes you stop and think, doesn't it?
It really does. What's fascinating here is how some of these big challenges in organizing human societies, they just keep popping up across millennia.
Right.
And how some ancient thinkers came up with, well, truly ingenious ways to tackle them.
Exactly. Today, we're plunging into this ancient Chinese idea, Tianxia.
Hmm.
It translates roughly to all under heaven, and we're going to explore it through the work of the sharp scholar Tingyang Zhao.
A really insightful perspective.
We'll trace its origins, get a handle on its core principles, and, figure out why these ancient concepts might just offer some surprisingly relevant insights for our crazy connected world today.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, for you, our listener, who's keen on getting to the core of complex topics quickly and having those light bulb moments,
Yeah.
this is right up your alley. We're offering a fresh perspective on global order, one that dares to look beyond the usual framework of nation states and empires.
A totally different lens, really.
It's a chance to see today's global puzzles through a totally different lens,
Hmm.
one that prioritizes getting along and, importantly, everyone benefiting.
Couldn't have said it better myself. We'll be dissecting a framework that puts getting along and shared benefits front and center.
So our guide here is Tingyang Zhao's scholarship, which
Yeah.
meticulously examines Tianxia as it appears in old Chinese writings.
Yeah.
He digs into where it came from, how it changed over time, and builds a compelling case for why it still matters now.
So we have some solid source material to work with.
Definitely. We've got pieces of his work that really lay out the historical scene, the fundamental beliefs behind Tianxia, and his arguments for why we should be paying attention to it today.
Okay, so our mission, as always, is simple. We're extracting the most valuable insights from this deep well of information.
Getting to the core nuggets.
Exactly. We want to help you clearly understand this intricate idea and reveal its surprising relevance without making your brain feel like it's doing Olympic-level gymnastics.
So where did this whole Tianxia thing even get started?
Right. The birth of Tianxia is really tied to a specific moment in history. The Zhou dynasty's somewhat unexpected victory around, well, 3,000 years ago.
Unexpected. How so?
This relatively small state suddenly found itself in charge of a much larger and more diverse group of people.
Talk about being the underdog who suddenly has to manage a whole league of champions. So what was the main headache they were trying to cure?
The big problem, as Zhao highlights, was figuring out how the small rules the large and how one governs many.
In a way that actually lasts. They couldn't just rely on being the new kid on the block with the biggest stick, you know?
Right, a small state trying to boss around a bunch of bigger ones? That sounds like a recipe for disaster, a never-ending parade of rebellions waiting to happen.
Precisely.
So what was their clever move? What did they come up with?
Tianxia emerged as a deliberate system design. The focus shifted from who had the biggest army to making the whole setup appealing to everyone involved.
Okay.
The emphasis was on fostering cooperation and making sure everyone felt they were getting something good out of it.
So instead of just barking orders, they were trying to build a system that everyone actually wanted to be a part of, like genuinely.
Precisely. Zhao introduces this really interesting concept of internalizing the world.
Internalizing the world, what does that mean?
The idea was to bring those external states into the Tianxia system, essentially making them like internal parts working within the same rules. This was seen as the way to stop those constant outside conflicts and rivalries from spiraling out of control, ending uncontrollable externalities, as Zhao puts it.
That's a smart way to look at it. Instead of constantly trying to keep them in line, you make them part of us. Define us more broadly.
And here's where it gets really interesting. For the Zhou, thinking about how to organize the whole world wasn't something that came after they sorted out their own state.
No.
It was a little way around. The fundamental question was how to create order across everything they knew as heaven and earth. World politics came first.
Wow. So they were thinking about global governance, or their version of it, right from the start.
Oh,
Okay. Now, Zhao talks about Tianxia having 3 dimensions. Can you break those down?
yeah, he breaks it down into geographical, socio-psychological, and political science dimensions.
Okay. Geographical first.
Geographically, Tianxia meant all the land under heaven. Now, their actual understanding of the planet was limited, much smaller than our map today, obviously.
Fair enough, sure.
Texts like the Xijing, one of the earliest collections of Chinese poetry, give us a peek into their worldview, along with the Guanzi. They give us early ideas of how far they thought it stretched.
And some thinkers pushed it further.
Right, someone like Xian imagined a much bigger, almost mythical version later on, but the core idea of this whole world, as they conceived it, was central.
So all under heaven was the ideal, the concept, even if their actual geography was a bit hazy. What about the socio-psychological side? That sounds interesting.
This focuses on a world where everyone acknowledges and willingly participates in this system. It's about winning hearts and minds.
Ah, the soft power angle.
Kind of, yeah. The belief was that this was even more important than just controlling territory. Zhou points to quotes from the Guanzi and the philosopher Shunzi, emphasizing that true influence comes from getting people to support you.
Right.
So it's not just about planting your flag, it's about getting the locals on board, making them feel invested.
Right. You need people to actually want to be part of what you're doing. It can't just be forced. And the third piece of this trinity is political science.
Yes, this is about Tianxia as a political entity defined by a global system, or at least a world system as they knew it.
Okay.
This system provides political stability and recognizes the authority within the entire realm. The thinker, Mozari, even imagined an integrated Tianxia that would bring orderly governance to everyone.
So it's not just about land or good feelings. It's about a structured political order for the whole known world, a
Yeah.
system.
Exactly. The big idea is of Tianxia as a completely inclusive world, aiming for what Confucius and Lu Buwei called Tianxia as the common good.
Their common good.
The ultimate goal was to build a system where the benefits of joining in were way better than any perceived advantages of staying out. Make it a no-brainer to participate.
Makes sense. If everyone feels they're getting a good deal, they're more likely to play along and cooperate. So how did the Zhou dynasty actually try to make this Tianxia thing a reality? What were the key parts of their system on the ground?
Zhao highlights three main elements: the infusement system, the ritual and music system, and governance based on virtue.
Okay, let's start with infusement. What was that about?
It was a way of overseeing things with different self-ruling states existing within a larger unified world. Now, it's important to understand that this wasn't exactly like European feudalism.
Okay, so not your typical knights and castles setup then. What were the key differences? How did it work?
The Tianxia system was structured more like a network. At the top was the Son of Heaven,
Son of Heaven.
who held the ultimate political sovereignty over the world. But, and this is crucial, he didn't own the land.
Oh, interesting. Who did?
The belief was that the land belonged to heaven. The Son of Heaven's authority was seen as a mandate from heaven, meaning heaven gave him the right to rule.
Okay.
And this mandate was tied to his virtue, his performance, essentially.
Performance based on.
Well, later on, thinkers like Confucius connected this virtue directly to whether the people were happy and satisfied with his rule.
So it wasn't just a blank check, a God-given right to rule no matter what, if the ruler was incompetent or unjust.
Exactly. Heaven could theoretically take away their permission slip, so to speak. The mandate could be lost.
Got it. And how is it structured below the Son of Heaven?
It was a hierarchy.
Yeah.
The top guy, the Son of Heaven, the suzerain, technically then different levels of vassal states and even more layers of authority within those states.
Yeah.
A multi-tiered system.
Got it. Like a set of Russian nesting dolls, but with political power distributed downwards. What about this ritual and music system? That sounds less political.
Well, yes and no. This was all about creating a shared spiritual order, a common cultural framework.
How so?
The goal was to give life meaning and foster a sense of universal harmony. Confucius himself stressed how important these rituals were for creating social cohesion and harmony.
Okay.
Zhao points out that this wasn't a religion focused on a distant god or the afterlife in the way we might think of it. It was more about making everyday worldly life feel sacred through these shared practices, ceremonies, and artistic expressions.
So it was more about building a common set of values and a sense of shared identity, community, through shared culture and experiences, binding people together that way.
Exactly. By giving things a spiritual dimension that everyone could participate in, they aimed to overcome the divisions that often come with purely material interests. Harmony becomes a more powerful force than competition, ideally.
That's a fascinating idea, using culture and shared experience to build political unity. Very sophisticated. And the third part was governance by virtue. That sounds like a moral principle.
It definitely evolved into a complex ethical doctrine, but initially, virtue in this context was perhaps more practical. It was about fairness in how benefits were shared.
Fairness.
Yes. As the ancient text, the Shanshu records, good governance was meant to serve the people. Ruling by virtue meant making sure that the good things in life, security, prosperity, were spread around, not just hoarded by a select few.
So it was about creating a system where everyone felt they were getting a fair shake, a sense of justice in the distribution.
Yes. The Duke of Zhou, a key figure, believed that only by governing with this kind of virtue could political power truly be justified and sustained.
Right.
Force could only get you so far, maybe win you a battle, but the appeal of a fair and beneficial system could, in theory, reach everyone and last for generations. True politics in this view was about creating universal cooperation and coexistence, not just about wielding power.
Okay, so this Tianxia system, which started as a practical solution for the Zhou dynasty, evolved into this whole philosophy of how the world should ideally be structured. Now, how did this concept then connect with the development of China itself over the centuries?
Well, after the Qin dynasty unified China largely through military might.
Right, the first emperor, terracotta army, all that.
Exactly. They moved away from the Zhu's Tianxia system towards a more centralized state. But the spirit of Tianxia didn't just vanish.
No, what happened to it?
It transformed, you could say, into something like a national ethos or a guiding ideal for the unified state.
So the idea of all under heaven became linked, maybe even fused, with the idea of a unified China.
Precisely. Zhao points to three key consensuses or shared understandings that have shaped Chinese civilization and echo Tianxia's principles.
Okay, what are they?
First, it's continuous history, that sense of deep historical continuity. Second, its diverse mix of ethnicities and cultures. It's always been a multi-ethnic, multicultural entity.
Right.
And third, its general lack of a single, dominant, universal, monotheistic religion. These all suggest a kind of natural inclination towards being inclusive and accommodating, which resonates with Tianxia.
Interesting connection. How does China's Whirlpool formula fit into this picture? That's a vivid image.
Zhao uses this to describe how the Central Plains region, the historical heartland, acted like a magnet.
A magnet.
Yeah, the competition for resources there, both material and cultural, created this centripetal force, drawing in different groups from the periphery. He argues that the expansion of China wasn't just about military conquest.
It wasn't.
Not solely. It was also about this powerful attraction to the cultural and political center. People were drawn in.
So groups weren't just being forced in, they were being pulled in by the perceived advantages of joining the club, so to speak.
Exactly. And key to this attraction were things like the shared system of Chinese writing,
A unifying technology, almost.
acting as a common cultural resource, and the inherently inclusive nature of the Tianxia concept itself. It offered a universally appealing framework that wasn't necessarily tied to any single ethnic group or local set of beliefs. It was potentially open to anyone.
And this Tianxia idea then became a useful tool for new rulers. How did that work?
Absolutely. Zhao talks about the snowball effect of political theology.
Okay.
New rulers, dynasty after dynasty, even those who were originally outsiders, adopted the Tianxia story, the succession myth, to justify their own rule.
Ah, they slotted themselves into the narrative.
Exactly. They presented themselves as the rightful inheritors
Mhm.
of this all-under-heaven mandate. It's like saying, we're in charge now, and this fits perfectly into the long, legitimate tradition of Tianxia.
So even when new kids took over the block, they'd point back to this ancient idea to say, see, we belong here. We're part of this ongoing story, legitimacy through history.
Precisely. This helped shape the very idea of China, which wasn't static, of course. It grew geographically and culturally over time, but always with this underlying ideal of Tianxia sort of hovering in the background.
It's like Tianxia was the original blueprint, the ideal, and China became one specific, evolving way of building according to, or at least referencing, that plan. Now, Zhao also talks about one country, multiple systems, as a kind of internal application of Tianxia. How does that work?
He sees this modern concept as having deep historical roots, essentially as a way to manage different ethnic and cultural groups within a larger unified system.
Oh.
It takes inspiration from Tianxi's core idea of fusing distinctiveness within integration, bringing together different elements into a larger whole while allowing them some autonomy.
So allowing different regions or groups to keep some of their own rules and cultures within the bigger framework of one country, like a practical compromise.
Exactly. It's about finding unity while still allowing for diversity. He points to historical examples,
Such as?
like the Han Dynasty's way of managing the western regions, they called it the Duhu system, or the Liao Dynasty's separate administrations for Fan and Han populations. The Yuan dynasty had parallel systems too, and the Ming and Qing dynasties continued using flexible methods of control in different regions.
So this isn't a brand new idea invented recently. There's a long history within China of managing internal diversity in this kind of flexible way.
Absolutely. Zhao's point is that even in this more compact form operating within the borders of a single country, the fundamental DNA of Tianxia, its all-inclusiveness and its compatibility, its ability to accommodate difference, is still arguably present.
It's like the Tianxia philosophy found a way to adapt and work even within the borders of a single large complex state. Okay, let's fast forward to today. This is where it gets really interesting. Why does Zhao argue that Tianxia is still relevant now in the 21st century?
His argument is quite provocative, actually. He suggests that true world history hasn't really begun yet,
Hasn't begun. What does he mean by that?
because the world isn't yet a truly inclusive Tianxia,
Oh,
a system with genuinely shared goals and mutual compatibility across the board.
okay.
He contrasts current international efforts, internationalism, with Tianxia's ultimate aim, which is to internalize all those external conflicts and rivalries, to make them part of a single shared system.
So international cooperation is a good first step, maybe, but Tianxia imagines something even more deeply connected, more integrated, a truly global system.
Precisely. He sees Tianxia as especially important, maybe even necessary, in our age of intense globalization and rapid technological change.
Why now, particularly?
Well, think about the dangers. Advanced technology falling into the wrong hands, the fragility of our interconnected systems, finance, communication, energy. A globally shared framework becomes increasingly essential for managing those risks.
Right, the idea of rogue AI or a global cyber meltdown or even just pandemics spreading rapidly, that definitely makes you think about global interconnectedness and vulnerability.
Exactly. He also warns against the modern obsession with purely individual or national self-interest and the drive for endless growth, pointing out the inherent dangers in such unchecked ambition in a world with finite resources and interconnected fates.
So the old ways of thinking like, what's good for my country first, regardless of others, might not cut it anymore, might actually be counterproductive in this new world.
That's the heart of his argument, but there's a flip side. While our global technology brings new dangers,
Yeah.
Zhao also believes it provides the very infrastructure, the physical conditions, the interconnectedness for a new kind of Tianxia to potentially emerge.
So the same things that create new risks might also offer a path to a new global order. That's a fascinating paradox. What are the key ideas he puts forward for what this new Tianxia system might look like?
He lays out 4 crucial concepts for a potential future Tianxia. First, internalization of the world, building on that old Tianxia principle of non-exclusiveness.
Okay, internalizing the world.
This is about creating a truly universal system for security and lasting peace. A supervisory system, maybe, that belongs to the entire world, not just one dominant power or bloc.
So a genuinely global system where everyone has a stake and a sense of ownership, not just a new empire.
Exactly. Second is relational rationality. This is a big one.
Relational rationality.
It's about finding a balance between individual or national self-interest and the fundamental need for everyone to coexist safely. He puts it very starkly. Coexistence prior to existence.
Coexistence comes first.
Yeah, the idea is that your own existence depends on stable coexistence. So the optimal strategy becomes minimization of mutual hostility.
Minimizing hostility. How would that work in practice?
Well, imagine 2 countries deciding whether to build up arms for a potential future conflict, which increases fear and risk for both, or to focus on trade and cooperation that benefits both. Relational rationality would strongly favor the latter, prioritizing long-term stability and mutual safety over perceived short-term gains through aggression or dominance.
That makes sense. If we're all in the same boat, we need to make sure no one is rocking it so hard that it capsizes for everyone. What's the third concept?
Third is Confucian improvement. This goes a step further than just do no harm or Pareto improvement, where at least one person is better off and no one is worse off.
How so?
It argues that any improvement, any progress, ideally must benefit everyone simultaneously. The principle is improved if and only if let improved, meaning an action is only a true improvement if it makes everyone involved better off.
Wow.
It aims for a truly cooperative system where everyone gains together. It's not just my win doesn't mean you lose, but ideally, my win also helps you win. Win-win as the standard.
That's a much higher bar for progress than we usually aim for. Very ambitious.
Indeed. And the fourth idea is compatible universalism.
Compatible universalism.
This suggests that universal values shouldn't be about imposing one culture's specific norms on everyone else. Instead, universal values should primarily apply to the interrelations between different cultures and groups, how we treat each other.
Okay.
It emphasizes respecting diverse cultures and ways of life, avoiding the trap of unilateral universalism where one group claims their way is the only right way for everyone. It focuses on symmetrical relationships.
So it's about finding common ground in the rules of engagement, how we interact fairly, rather than trying to make everyone think and act exactly the same way internally. Respecting difference while agreeing on interaction principles.
Precisely. This new Tianxia, in Zhao's view, is fundamentally about creating peace. He sees politics at its best as the art of constructing a stable order where everyone can coexist. Peace is the ultimate political goal.
So it's not about who's on top, who wins the power game, but about creating a system, a level playing field where everyone can thrive peacefully together.
Exactly. He introduces an interesting test for rationality here, the universal imitation test.
Universal imitation.
Basically, any strategy or action that, if everyone else copied it, would lead to chaos or mutual destruction. Well, that strategy is irrational in the long term. Think arms races, for example.
Yeah, if everyone does it, everyone loses eventually.
Precisely. True intelligence, true rationality in this context means thinking about how others will respond. That's relational rationality again, and aiming for outcomes that are good for everyone collectively. Collective rationality.
It's like saying, think about the ripple effect of your actions, because those ripples will eventually come back to you, especially in a connected world.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He reframes individual rationality not just as maximizing gain, but perhaps more fundamentally as negatively defending one's interests, avoiding harm, ensuring security, which makes it more compatible with risk aversion and this relational thinking. The new Tianxia system, he argues, must be built on this kind of relational foundation to define genuinely universal values, and perhaps even a kind of global constitution, ultimately aiming to eliminate zero-sum games where one side's gain must be the other's loss.
So really moving away from that competitive win-lose mentality that dominates so much of international relations. Now, one big question that might be on people's minds, especially for listeners in the West, is whether Tianxia is just a fancy new name for China wanting to be the top dog, a justification for a Pax Sinica, a Chinese-led world order. How does Zhao address that very real concern?
Yeah, that's a critical question, and he directly acknowledges this worry.
Good.
However, he strongly argues that Tianxia, as he envisions it based on its historical principles, is fundamentally different from the idea of an empire or hegemony.
How is it different?
It's not about conquering, dominating, or being hostile. The ideal Tianxia is envisioned as a system that people and states would voluntarily choose to be part of.
Voluntarily? Why?
Because of the shared benefits, the security, the peace it offers. It's based on coexistence achieved through relational rationality, not through one nation calling all the shots and forcing others into line. It's about the appeal of the system itself.
So the argument is it's not about China imposing its will on the world, but offering a potentially attractive model for global order.
That's the core philosophical argument, yes. He also touches on the idea of an American Tianxia that some have proposed, clarifying that Tianxia isn't really about competition between nations for who gets to run their version of it.
It's not.
No, the goal is more fundamental. It's about moving beyond the current fragmented, often conflict-ridden, non-world state, as he might call it, through shared principles and building a truly shared global order for everyone, overcoming the very idea of competing national orders.
It sounds like the core idea, then, is about moving beyond nationalistic rivalries altogether, towards a more inclusive and genuinely cooperative way of running things globally. Okay, so after this fascinating exploration, what's the big takeaway from our deep dive into Tianxia?
I think the main thing is that this ancient concept of Tianxia provides a really powerful and, frankly, different way to think about how the world could be organized. It challenges the traditional, often cynical, focus on power struggles between nations. Its emphasis on including everyone, thinking relationally, thinking about the impact on others, and the radical idea that everyone should benefit from the system. It offers a compelling vision for navigating the tricky complexities of our interconnected future. It gives us another framework.
Right. And maybe here's a provocative thought for you, the listener, to chew on. Considering the very real dangers we face, from runaway technology to climate change, and the clear limits of countries just looking out for number one when tackling global problems.
Yeah.
Could the core ideas of Tianxia, if we adapt them for the 21st century, actually offer a more sustainable path towards everyone getting along and sharing prosperity? What parts of this ancient way of thinking really strike a chord or maybe raise red flags when you look at the challenges in the world today?
That's definitely something to think about.
It is. Food for thought as you continue to make sense of our global landscape.
And this deep dive has really only scratched the surface of this rich and fascinating idea. There's much more depth there.
Absolutely.
We definitely encourage you to explore Tingyang Zhao's work further if this sparked your interest, and just generally to consider how these ancient insights might inform our current conversations about how to govern the world and what our shared future might or could look like.